enactment of pro-democracy clouds in regional bodies, and conditional development aid. And still, at this moment, many African countries are at an advantage position, or they are really ready to learn from such kind of established system. For instance, if you take Ethiopia, we are undertaking a reform in our government, and we are working towards free and fair election. We are establishing independent electoral board, justice system. We are bringing gender parity in having position in different government position. And also we are freeing present journalists. So such kind of countries are really needing such different kind of support in promoting democracy. So I believe working more in experience sharing among parliamentarian, promotion of training, provision of training for judges, civil group leaders, legislator can really work better to learn from such kind of system. And the third issue is like technical and economic cooperation. African countries have greatly benefited from bilateral capacity building program launched by India more than 50 years ago, and as it helps expand, build and share technical skill among developing countries. But still, a specific cooperation are taking place in ICT, engineering, health, education and technologies. And good number of slots has been allocated, and it has been seen increasing from time to time. But I still believe that there need to be like transparency on the allocation of slots. How are these slots are being allocated for these African countries? And also there need to be like a kind of monitoring on how to utilize these slots. Okay, so working on this would really help in strengthening the cooperation. For instance, this year Ethiopia has got 400 slots. Last year it was like 300. So we assume that since we have used better last year, our slot has increased by 100 number, and it will continue like that. So there should be like a kind of transparency on how this slot allocation is going on. And the last one is trade and investment. It is well known that Africa is the second populous continent, with majority of the population is young and growing fast. And this has been like an opportunity for India trader and investor. So far, thousands of Indians are operating in trade and investment in Africa. But still, the balance of trade is against Africa. And Africa, I believe, should have to work hard, always not to be like a target of commodities from others. And therefore, India also should have to like work towards making her market to some extent open for African agricultural products, because many of Africans are producing agricultural products, and India has like a large population that can consume these products. So making the market open would like to make the balance a little bit better than it used to be. So I believe working on this thing would really help in strengthening the relationship. And still, I believe there need to be specific focus and energy. So I think these are the issues. Thank you very much for your ears.
Thank you, Excellency, for those very precise points and issues that you have raised. Indeed, all of them are extremely important, and the challenges will continue to grow, and we have to anticipate them and try to find them. And I'm sure your suggestions will be taken into account. I just wanted to say about there is, in all these areas, we are having consultations at the AU level in your own country. Often it happens where India's global positions on various foreign policy issues are shared. Likewise, as far as the allocation of slots you mentioned, you see India keeps on increasing, and now number of slots that you want. And the area, as you very rightly said, it depends on utilization, because certain countries, for whatever reasons, are unable to do that. It is a pretty transparent process. It happens in consultation with our own ambassador, with the ambassador of the country. So if you feel that in certain areas you need to have the training for certain people, you can always approach our development partnership division, and they will be very happy to consider those requests. In fact, in the last IAFS, as Director also mentioned, we had 50,000 additional slots were given to the African countries, and they were equitably distributed according to the scope, the requirement, and new areas. More than 200 institutions today in the capacity capacity building program are training various people. But your issues are, and of course trade and aid go together, but India also prefers more trade, and we have, although provided to sub-Saharan countries and many countries, market access at a much lower rate. Definitely the kind of problems you are mentioning, and which you have not very clearly mentioned, I'm sure the Ambassador of Zambia will mention that, is that import of some of the agricultural products. Yes, there is a tremendous possibility, and in the larger context, India does look at, and I'm no longer at the government, so I can simply say from outside, is that we are looking agriculture as one of the major areas of our cooperation between India. And I mentioned earlier, it could even be expanded in trilateral format with our Gulf countries, India's expertise in, and your availability of land and other local people. So it's a win-win situation for all the countries. And I'm quite sure we'll convey that if there are specific problems, I'm quite sure you will be following with the country's people here. Now I would like to invite my friend Mr. Ahmad Jibril, Child Affairs of the State of Libya, to share his views and also to brief us as to exactly what is happening in Libya. And I hope Libya gets out of this troubled times very soon, and India stands ready to assist.
Good morning, everyone. And let me start by expressing my thanks and gratitude to Professor Arvinda and Ambassador Anil and all the people in VIF and MII-CCIA for giving me the opportunity to elaborate on such an important subject, and also, as you requested, to talk about Libya's case. For those who don't know, Ambassador Anil was India's ambassador in Libya, so at least today I'm encouraged by having him in my side. And Libya's relations with India, unfortunately, it's not very. It's rather a sad case, because the situation the relations has decreased in the last few years because of the conflict that is going on in Libya. And here I would focus more on Libya's relations with India. As you mentioned, Africa has become the center of the priority of many developed countries, not only India. But we have seen India's role has increased in the last few decades. However, it's worth mentioning that India's Africa relations differs from other countries for the historic background and long-standing relations India has had with many African countries, including my country. Here I would like to look at it not only from economic and investment perspective, but from a political perspective or a wider perspective, as they are all interconnected. India today is not a banana republic. It's a leading country. It's occupying a very important role in the international arena. And though when it comes to Africa, and here I'm talking about my country at least, we don't see a positive or constructive role for India in Libya. I want to talk about Libya in specific now. Libya today, for those who are not following on what's happening in Libya, is suffering from the international or some countries' intervention in Libya. And we are not inviting in India to intervene. Rather, we are seeking for constructive involvement of India because of the trust, as I mentioned, and the long-standing position of India in Libya and in the continent. We believe this involvement will bring the balance to the international community stands in my country. Also, those countries who are now involved in Libya, they are not fighting or, supporting the parties in Libya for our interest. They are doing it for their interest. And to reserve the mutual interest between India and Libya, which has been, or it was much stronger than the relations with many countries who are involved now in Libya. To reserve this mutual interest, I think we would encourage India to come more forward and to pay more attention and to be involved in a constructive way in Libya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Only thing I can tell you is that you already mentioned yourself the reason that the Indian government has not been very proactively involved in the current saga of Libya. But we definitely are in touch with our interlocutors and the friends and know what exactly is happening. And Indians are ready. As you know that during the revolution, we had one of the largest set of companies that were present, and therefore they had a great economic hit during that period. Some of them have not even come out of it. And so this has to be a concerted effort, and we are hoping that things will stabilize soon and India will play its right role in the reconstruction of Africa. I can assure you that.
One more. In the next couple of weeks, an international conference will be held in Berlin, and this conference is organized by the UN but sponsored by the German government. And the German government, I think, is trying to bring the parties, and now I'm talking about the international actors, together on a consolidated position and to hold this meeting before the end of the year. And the main outcome of this meeting will be a ceasefire and return to the peaceful dialogue. So I think those who want to contribute or those who want to push this conference forward have the opportunity to do it now. Thank you very much.
And we hope that Berlin conference will lead to some forward way. Sorry. Well, Berlin Wall broke down, so I hope this wall will also break down. Well, Excellency, moving forward, I will now request to another very new colleague in Delhi, and very warm welcome to you, madam, Mrs. Tahanina Rasa Molina, Charge d'Affaires of Republic of Madagascar. Please.
Thank you, Excellency. First of all, I would like to thank Vivekananda International Foundation for having organized this meeting today. It is important to share views and perspectives regarding relations between our countries and India. As far as Madagascar and India are concerned, we've always had good relationships based on mutual respect. And since the beginning of the year, since the election of Madagascar President, Mr. Angelina Rajoelina, Madagascar seeks to reinforce its presence and participation in global issues on the international community, and in that project, India has an important place and has an important role. So we seek to develop further cooperations, whether it is commercial cooperations in defense and security issues, and of course, as far as global issues are concerned. And for Madagascar, as an African countries, we would like to develop not only cooperations with India, but we also seek help to help us do trade with on globally, and for capacity building has a big role in this sense. Up to now, we used to have cooperation with India, reinforcing capacities of government officials. But now we seek more reinforcement for entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurships, to help youth do business, do trade, either India or overseas. And in this regard, we really would like to strengthen cooperation not only for the government officials, but also outside government. Government areas. And for global issues, we also face challenges. Environmental challenges is really a big priority, and we see that in this matter there should be stronger developing countries' voices and perspectives as regard to governance of environmental issues. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Well, as you are aware that India is also on the forefront of climate change, and we are very closely engaged with all the island nations, small island nations, and have meetings in the United Nations and trying to address their concerns very often. And capacity building, of course, it is also open not only to the government servants but also under various programs. So you could always advise the Minister of External Affairs if you have specific areas, preferably in consultation with your Indian colleague in Antananarivo, and I'm quite sure that will happen. Thank you very much for your... Now, I would like to request my dear friend, His Excellency General Chris Sunday Ize of Nigeria, and I had a few years in your great country. Excellency, let's hear from you, an intellectual ambassador.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the organizers, the foundation, for inviting us to this. I have a lot of issues that are of concern to Africa as a whole have been tackled by Ambassador Tizita here. So I'm going to confine myself to what concerns Nigeria. I want to start by saying that our priorities today are security, capacity building, and infrastructure, in that order. Those are our priorities. And the reason is to lay the foundation for industrialization. Now, infrastructure generally is not something that you do in installments. You know, infrastructure takes a lot of money at the outset. And if African countries rely on saving over decades to build infrastructure, they won't get it done. Because if you don't build infrastructure, you can't grow your economy. If you can't grow your economy, you cannot get foreign exchange. So it's a catch-22. It's a chicken and egg issue. I am saying that because of the perception, that Africa is opening itself to economic and neo-colonization. In fact, I think I watched President Museveni once on BBC on Hard Talk when they asked him this question, and he said essentially what I'm saying now. I think Grace is there, so you can. Essentially what I'm saying now. We must have infrastructure, So, and the British, they leased or they forced the Chinese to lease Hong Kong to them for 99 years. Now, when they were living, they didn't live with the infrastructure that they built in Hong Kong. Now, the same thing, whenever the Chinese will leave Hambantota, they won't carry what they have built in that port. So it is necessary that people understand that we are not borrowing simply for the fun of borrowing. We are borrowing because we are forced to build infrastructure so that, and in any case, it was said that they start that by 2050 we are going to have the explosion of the youth bulge that Samuel Huntington has pointed out in The Clash of Civilizations. So it's an existential issue, and the earlier other people who are looking at Africa understood it, the better. Now the Indians have built a port in Chabahar, and I think that it is the same principle that they used to build. So the other day we went to RIS and we're talking about South-South cooperation, and I met a gentleman who said he was Secretary of Commerce in India, and he said that he had been thinking along the same lines, that it is right time that some special purpose vehicles are designed for intervention in building infrastructure in Africa. So this is something that the Indians may look seriously on, because China, to name names, China is its economic model is a state capitalism, which is not what obtains here. But I think that a little bit of tinkering of the economy, of the nexus between your economic model and your foreign policy. I think it is. I think that think tanks like VIF can look at it. Now, LOC is very good, but direct foreign investment is much more important than LOC. In the introduction, you said, sir, that investment is now 53 billion. As opposed to LOC of 10 billion that was announced. And even the LOC of 10 billion that was announced, you also mentioned it in as part of the challenges that the bureaucracy of implementing the LOC itself is another issue. So sometimes by the time you conceive of a program under the LOC, before you implement it, the situation has changed. And if you now go back to begin the documentation of another program, it will already have been overtaken by time. Then let me talk about African continental free trade area and dumping. Nigeria right now has closed its borders as we are talking, because Nigeria, the first time that the treaty was signed in Kigali, President Buhari had gotten ready to go. His advance party was already in Kigali to prepare for him to come, and the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria rushed to his office and begged him not to go because they wanted to take another look at the fine print. Eventually, in July in Niamey, he signed it. And anybody who reads in the papers that Nigeria signed to the Africa Free Trade Area in July and then closed its borders in October will not understand why it happened. You know? But the thing is, dumping, they use neighboring countries, I wouldn't name any country, they use neighboring countries to dump when we are trying to grow and to lay the foundation for an industrial base. And you were there. You were there in our High Commission when we had the last seminar on investment opportunities in Nigeria, and I was telling them that the biggest potential beneficiaries of African Free Trade Area is India, because it is Indians that are ready to put down physical things to make things in Africa more than any other people. So it is so I tell them, take medical tourism for instance. I tell them that for one patient that you get that comes to India for medical tourism, there are more than 10 others who would like good medical care but just can't afford the transport in addition to the medical bill. So if you seek partners in Africa and establish industries, establish campuses of schools, diagnostic centers, things like that, it goes beyond aid. It's a big business model, potential business model. You know, so until I think that if it needs repeated closures of borders, I'm sure that the government will have to do it, not because it likes to do it, but because it has become an existential threat to Nigeria. If we don't produce the things that we consume, we cannot survive. We know that oil, which is giving us an artificial buoyancy economically, we know that's a depleting asset, and also we know that climate change concerns, de-emphasizing energy based on carbon. So we as a people, even as opposed to government, have decided that it is time we started doing something about it. Now, so value addition, that's the keyword. Then security cooperation, Ambassador Tizita has mentioned it, but India has been doing very well in capacity building in security cooperation. But I think that if you take piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, for instance, I have said it and I stand to be corrected. India and the Philippines are the two countries with the largest number of sailors in the entire world. You know, so when there is piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, it's likely that it is maybe a ship that is flying a Liberian flag that is owned by a Greek man, that is crewed by an Indian crew. So nominally, it may be happening off the West African coast, but the people that actually suffer it are not necessarily Nigerians, but since it is within our EEZ, then it becomes our responsibility. So what I'm saying is that the time has come when outside of capacity building, practical things like donation or provision of platforms, like maritime patrol aircraft and things like that, so you are doing it because for yourself, the same thing also applies to maybe combating terrorism like Boko Haram, because if the terrorists come, they can kill Nigerians or Senegalese or Niger or Malians. Yes, that is human beings, and that is regrettable. But they will wreck a factory which an Indian sweated to build, like you just mentioned in the case of Libya. So the globalization has become pervasive, so when any segment of society is hot, it impacts negatively on everybody. So what I'm saying is that the foreign policy of India has to be more closely tied to its defense policy. As in fact, I think that India, as an emerging global power, has to look at developing a defense policy for Africa. I think so. The components will be left to the Indians and to their SWOT analysis as to what they can do and what they cannot do. But to approach things in an ad hoc way will not endure in the long term. Then I come to what I call Indians and Africans as opposed to India and Africa. The truth, the statistics, we just heard that 3 million diaspora Indians are out there, and a lot of them are in Africa. Now, they are giving opportunities to engage in legitimate business. The same doesn't happen here. They don't give them work permits. You can't bring anything. If my wife goes to market to buy Nigerian food to cook for me, she has to buy it from an Indian because a Nigerian cannot import Nigerian food into India. Now, this is something that, because you asked us for practical things that can be done. And I have raised this issue severally in many places, and I think it is something that needs to be done. Then, work to change stereotyping of Africans amongst the Indian population is a very big problem. Then I say take statistics from outside Africa with a pinch of salt. The Chinese gained a foothold in Africa largely because the Western media, CNN, BBC, the Wall Street Journal, London Economist, and so on and so forth, they kept up their scenario building of doomsday prophecies and so on, and then everybody was, their businessmen, were scared to come to Africa. That is how the opportunity was presented to the Chinese, because Africa